So, Clay, we're at the finale of Star Trek Enterprise, and I figure we have so many comments, I might as well read a few of them off the bat, and then we'll just get those out of the way, and then we'll get right into it. So, first, how are you before we go too deep into this?
Good. I don't want any of these comments to be disparaging this gem of an episode, though, because my favorite episode of the series. So
let's see what the bag of tricks has here. Captain McMunchausen says, "These are the Voyages. What a bummer. Poor Mr. and Mrs. Tripp. Your daughter was killed in a terrorist attack. Your son was killed by space pirates. And you had a granddaughter, but she's dead too. What an end for the most charismatic character on the show. Rest in peace, Charles Tucker III." Brennan Braga writes in and says, "Scott Bakula was the nicest guy and we had a great relationship, and it was the only time where he called me about the script and he said he had big problems with it. He was pissed that we were doing an episode that really wasn't an Enterprise episode, but was a Next Gen episode. Everyone, including the fans of the show, felt the same way." Matt Ross says, "These are the Voyages."
I did not care.
Rick, settle down.
I told Bakula, I said, Bakula, I like you, but honestly, go fuck yourself.
Matt Ross says,
if the show wasn't already canceled, I would have fired you before you even finished the sentence.
Possibly the worst ending of any TV series by inserting the more successful show TNG into Enterprise. It was as if the producers had no faith of the heart that the show could conclude itself. The death of Tripp rivals Tasha Yar's meaningless death. It's also hard to believe that this crew was together for 10 years with no promotions, but they all got epaulets and the blinking lights on the bridge. Overall, I think Enterprise failed to inspire or lead to another Star Trek renaissance and was, at the time, the lamest Star Trek out there. One bad ending out of 5. Jonathan Frakes says, "Rick called me and said, we'd like you to do the last episode of the show as a Valentine for the fans." And I thought, okay, it's Rick and it's Star Trek, and I always say yes. But it was at least my feeling
I needed to redo my bathroom. So,
but it was at least my feeling that it was an uncomfortable situation to be brought into a show that, first of all, has been prematurely canceled, and to essentially be part of their finale when it was really Scott's show. And he was such a gentleman. He was notably generous and civil and thoughtful. And I thought inside he's got to be thinking, what the fuck are these guys doing here? My show's been canceled, and you guys are coming here to try to close it out? I would have been so insulted. I don't think that was our finest hour. Larry DiStefano says, "Horrible ending. Who thought this one up? The show started with a good idea, but the crew just never grabbed the audience. Cast and writing were mediocre most of the time." And final, first comment comes from Jeffrey Combs, who says, "That episode was a bit of a mess. I think the message that was being sent there by Rick Berman, frankly, was, okay, we might have been canceled, but I want to put in front of you that I also had a successful Next Generation. I thought then, and I still do, that it was insulting to the series regulars of Enterprise that they weren't even given the dignity and the time, therefore, to wrap up their own goddamn show. And you know, even Jonathan Frakes felt the same way. He said, why am I here? What is this? It's a job. I'll take the paycheck and I'll do it, because if I don't, somebody else will." Thank you,
Spiner
commenters.
was clearly game to do it because Spiner's in there too.
He just had to phone it in. That was easy. He didn't even have to show up or put the makeup on. So thank you to 3 of our patrons and 3 new patrons, the production and actors behind Star Trek Enterprise. That was all pulled from the 50-Year Mission Oral History, which is a book that I really recommend. It's those guys talking about the finale. Here we are, Clay. These have been the Voyages, and these are the Voyages.
Yes.
You ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right, let's get the opening information out of the way here. These are the Voyages, the 22nd episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise, the series finale. Came out on the 13th of May, 2005. It is 2 of 2 in the Riker and the Pegasus arc. Written by Rick Berman and Brennan Braga, directed by Alan Croker, in-universe date 47457.1, which is 2370. In this episode, in hopes of receiving some help before making a difficult personal decision, Commander William T. Riker of the Enterprise D observes a holodeck simulation of the final mission of the original starship Enterprise, as commanded by Jonathan Archer, in the days immediately preceding the birth of the United Federation of Planets over 2 centuries earlier. Enterprise is done. This is the finale. It's infamous. It's an infamous episode of Star Trek. And Clay, I guess I'll start this. You had said in the last episode that when we got to the end of Terra Prime, you said, I'm going to hold off on my rating of this one until I see the finale and I see what's going on there, so that I'll be able to rate this one fairly, whether or not this is a 2 or a 1. Counterpoint to why that doesn't really work. They can both be ones, I think. It is,
That's
it
true.
is
They
possible
sure can.
that they can both be ones. Although, I will say, and I'll throw it to you, because I've been talking a lot. These are very different ones, in my opinion. This is a one, in my opinion, but they're very different from Terra Prime.
Yeah. I will say this is a terrible Enterprise episode. It is a insulting series finale. However, I actually think it's a really good idea. Like, yeah. I think it's a really I think it's a really clever way to kind of square the circle of the remaining years of Enterprise, to place it inside the holodeck of TNG. It's really tough because it is such a fuck you to the show. It is such a fuck you to the show. I didn't realize, it's been a while since I've seen this. I've said many times, this was the only episode of Enterprise I had ever watched. And the only other time I watched this was probably 10 years ago at this point.
And you watched it based on its reputation as a failure of an Enterprise episode, right? Or a finale.
Yeah, because I watched it specifically because I had been watching through TNG, and I had heard that this one is essentially a TNG episode, so I threw that in there while I was going through TNG. And I had forgotten how much TNG is in this. Like, I didn't even realize they rebuilt the goddamn sets from the ship.
They rebuilt it.
Holy crap. I thought it was just Frakes in that you get the black and the yellow holodeck lines, and then Marina Sirtis popped in a bit, but it was mostly Enterprise. I completely forgot that they walk around the Enterprise D and you get like exterior shots of the ship. It is literally just a TNG episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do think it's a really clever idea. I think it's to close out the story that they're trying to tell. Obviously, they can't do it naturally. And so instead of, they could have just jumped forward 10 years, I guess, but that would have been kind of clunky.
You mean in terms of Enterprise wrapping itself up naturally? They don't have time to get into anything like believable in a sense. Like they're abruptly at the end of this series, and they need to figure out some way to close it out.
Yeah, like they've chosen to. It's tough because like the last episode works as a season finale in concept or series finale in concept because they are kind of brushing the outline or brushing the edge of the formation of the Federation. This one is still brushing the edge, but it's, doing it more forcefully. But like they clearly wanted to end this series with the beginning or the signing of whatever treaty that begins the formation of the Federation. And so in order to do that, you would have to either just straight up jump 10 years into the future or come up with some clever mechanic as a way to do it. And this is a fairly clever way to do it. I think you probably could have done it differently. If it were me, I probably would, as much as I hate to say this, I probably would have brought Daniels back into the equation.
Oh, wow.
That's probably a more natural way to do it because Daniels is already, I don't know.
You've been drinking Clay?
Actually, yes.
It's the worst idea I've ever heard.
Well, no, if you got to get there, right? If you got to jump.
Just because of the time travel aspect, you mean? Like he would jump
basically,
Frakes
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or not Frakes. Or I'm saying you could do this without the TNG stuff.
Oh, okay.
If you were going to do it without the TNG stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Either
just to jump them into a position where the Federation can be signed at that time or created.
Yeah, you can either jump. Unfortunately, they kind of already did this to a certain extent because you already had those scenes where in the whatever crossover where Daniels comes and jumps Archer forward to the signing of the whatever. And so they already kind of did that. So you can't really do it again. So they can't do that. But if you just jump the show 10 years into the future, I don't know. I don't know if that works. I know they kind of do that in the finale of Voyager, but they kind of reset everything after the end of it. But yeah, as a way to kind of jump into the future, also cut up the amount of time you have to spend on certain stuff. It's not a bad idea. It's kind of a clever idea. It's fun. You get, Frakes to come in and stuff. I have lots of questions about it, such as, when does this actually take place in the Pegasus? Because at the end of this episode, he walks out and he's like, I'm ready to tell Captain Picard everything. He doesn't tell Captain Picard a goddamn thing until they go over and they get the thing and bring it back to the Enterprise, and he has literally no other choice.
Yep.
It's not like he goes into his ready room and says, I have something to tell you. It's completely a forced admission or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure when exactly this is supposed to take
spur
place.
of the moment. In Pegasus, it comes up as a spur of the moment because Riker's back is against the wall. And here it's implied that he's waiting for the moment where it's going to be happening. And just as a matter of a plug, if you're interested in our thoughts about the Pegasus episode of TNG, we covered it on Patreon 3 days ago on Monday, so you can listen to that. It's out on patreon.com/thepensky-file. We talked about the Pegasus, and we were wondering how this was going to tie into this one. It's a good place as any, although let me go back to your original point here about it being a good idea. This to me is as far as you can push that statement and have it be true. You can go, yeah, this is a good idea. However, I don't think any part of this.
Good. I said clever. I said clever.
Okay, sure. This is a clever idea. However, everything post coming up with that idea is a failure here, I think, like outside of that. So, well, it is kind of.
I will invoke the quote from Spinal Tap. There is such a fine line between clever and stupid.
I don't know if Riker is the best place to start. I think that my big takeaway from watching this one is that this felt incredibly artificial to me. It felt like it was an episode like almost the cast came back after 5 years and they're like, we have to shoot the finale. And they're like, okay. And they throw them back in and none of it feels real. And on a certain level, none of it is real because it's all a holodeck program that Riker is watching. So you're in this weird thing of, I know this is a TV show, but at the same time, I'm watching what is like a unsolved mysteries version of what history thinks is happening at this time. And they're just kind of like, T'Pol and Archer had a private conversation. We don't know what that was about, but we assume it went something
That was my
along.
other question. I was like, this is really pushing the boundaries of what the holodeck is capable of as far as AI recreation, or everything that is ever done and said on a Starfleet vessel is recorded. on HD video and put into the record so you can recreate it on the holodeck in the future.
I'd buy that. I wouldn't buy that on the NX-01, but I'd buy that later, I guess. No. But it's layer on layer of, you go, I'm sitting there going, none of this is like not real. It's weird to be watching a TV show and saying that, but you're like, none of this is real. The other thing that killed me is that when the episode start going and Riker will just pop up and he goes, this is a boring bit. Skip ahead 5 hours. It's like,
I didn't know we could do that. I would have done that through half these episodes. I didn't know we could do that.
It's so crazy to me. Did you have any trouble squaring the reality of this one? Like in some ways the episode just doesn't feel real to me because so much of it is constructed for the purpose of being a finale, and it's really distracting. I was surprised by how distractingly fake all of this felt to me.
Yeah, I had a tough time reconciling that because at a certain point you're like, okay, just let it go. It's a holodeck thing, whatever. There's really no boundaries on what the holodeck can and can't do. I mean, literally fucking Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes once walked out of it and became a villain on the show.
Yep.
But on the other hand, it's like, the whole time I was thinking the same thing you were. And then they have that one scene when they're flying down where T'Pol and Tripp are talking to each other about whether or not they're going to see each other. And T'Pol was like, I was talking to the chef and he really made me think about things regarding our relationship. It's like, you're a fucking program. What? You shouldn't. That's not how this is meant
Right.
to. I don't think this is how this is supposed to work.
You mean
Like,
that
I don't think-
Rikers created a schism in causality there where she's now reacting to
yeah.
Riker? Yeah.
Yeah, you now you're in like Westworld territory where the AI recreation of a very specific event involving T'Pol and Tripp has now changed its mind because you have talked to it through this program, and I obviously, again, you're not supposed to think about that stuff, but it's hard not to.
It's the entire construction of the episode. It's unavoidable with the amount of Rikers popping in saying, like, go to the next scene. This is boring. I'm going to go do something else. Enter observer mode, where I can just walk around freely and just sit in the background of scenes for no reason and just be filmed. That was the thing that drove me. Like, it constantly pulls you out of it. Riker is just pointlessly in the background of so many shots as characters are having, like, series finale conversations with each other, and he's just sitting in a chair watching them going like, oh geez, oh my god, these guys are talking to each other. It's like, wow, this is very strange.
And they also have a recreation of when they go down to that planet to rescue Shran's daughter.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I guess in this program, you got to have some fun, so send them down there. Like, all of that stuff is so bad that I'm willing to believe, with inside the parameters of the idea of this episode, that they have no idea what happened and how Tripp actually died. They just made it up, and this was the stupidest thing that they could think of.
Computer, fill in the blanks for Tripp's death. I don't want to get to Tripp just yet. I do want to say that the Tripp and T'Pol, when they're on the shuttlecraft talking, and T'Pol goes, Tripp, do you ever think of our dead child? And he goes, no, I don't think about it. It must be lucky to be a Vulcan. I don't think about anything like that. I don't know if that's a good place to start either. I think so.
Can I mention one thing before we dive into this
go ahead.
that I liked? Last episode, I did mention that or I should say, in our coverage of Pegasus, I mentioned that the whole Pegasus thing involving Pressman and stuff feels like if it was on a later show, it would have been a Section 31 thing.
Yeah.
Riker essentially retroactively makes it a Section 31 thing in this episode.
How so? Sorry.
He has a line where he says a secret group inside Starfleet intelligence developed this thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't directly say it, but that's what the implication is.
Yeah. There's just a sect of admirals or whatever that broke off and weren't doing anything.
I only wanted to say that now because my iPad with my notes on it is going to die in a couple minutes, so I just want to make sure I remember to say it.
So I think before we get to pull this into a focus a little bit, before we get to how this works as a finale of Enterprise, I think it's worth talking about the structure of doing this first, because what I think that happens here is this is a device that, even if you consider it to be a clever idea, the execution here, I think, both ruins this episode of Enterprise and makes the Pegasus stupider by what they do in this.
Yes.
Like, it's interesting that it's incredibly distracting that Frakes looks 15 years older or whatever, and Sirtis seems it. Their performance distracts me because it seems that they have been out of that show for long enough where now playing these roles feels like they are cosplaying as themselves. They don't act like Riker and Troy in a real sense. It feels like Frakes and Sirtis got dressed up and acted out these scenes again. Like, enough time has passed where it's no longer natural for them to be doing this stuff. As you say, Riker spills his guts to Troy about this, which is all kind of weird, and that brings up a whole bunch of problems. Here's my biggest problem. I don't even think, or I don't understand, maybe you can explain to me, what Riker takes away from this that teaches him anything about how the Pegasus is supposed to resolve itself.
I throw yourself on a grenade when you have to. I don't know. I assume it's about.
Is it Tripp's death? Just do what you need to do the right thing or something? I guess.
Yeah. I don't know why he needed to look at the, like, that's I think the overall biggest problem with this episode is, if this is the idea you're going with, right? Sure. Okay, fine. Riker is in the holodeck. He's looking back at the first Enterprise to get some guidance as to what he should do in this really tough situation. Why didn't he just fast forward to where Tripp blew himself up?
Right.
Like, there's nothing. The actual story in this episode is so stupid and so inconsequential and so not an Enterprise story that I have no fucking idea why he would go back and specifically look at this event.
Right. Yeah.
You could have picked like 5 different things that happened in this show. Like, I know the idea is like, oh, it was the creation of the Federation, but like, it's not like the thing that they pulled off in this story
triggers
somehow
that. Right.
triggers that, or was like they got the final piece. It's just that
this is about the ride
Archer
to the
didn't
fireworks
die.
factory. This is about the ride to the fireworks factory, and Riker's sitting in the back seat watching it.
Yeah, it's the only thing that it has to do with the Federation is the fact that Archer didn't die.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that right before this treaty is signed, the Enterprise probably should not be going into like gang war territory to get back the daughter of someone who was supposedly dead anyway. Like, I don't think they should be going on this trip to begin with. I understand it's Shran, but still.
Why?
It's just such a inconsequential story that I don't know why they picked this.
Yeah.
I have to assume because it was cheap to do.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple things. This is the first finale after the animated series that is not feature length. So this is a very short finale for a Star Trek show.
Yeah. It's a very short Enterprise episode too.
It's a very short
literally
Enterprise
half of
episode.
it is TNG.
And so you're in this position where, like, to me, it just feels like a lot of strange decisions. Like the Shran story, I don't understand. That feels like it's like we have a story that needs to be over in about 7 minutes. What can it be? Yeah. And they're like, well, Combs is around. It's like, okay, sure. So it's Shran. So they haven't seen him in 6 years or 3 years or something. They thought he was dead. He comes back. He's got a daughter now that Archer has to help him rescue. And she's been abducted by schlubby, shitty, generic alien of the week guy who's down there. That will tie into a bigger problem down the road. But it's just, like, on a basic level, why is the show required to jump forward in time this much? And what did it accomplish by doing that? Is this a memory alpha note that they can't be in this year until the Federation is signed, so they have to jump 6 years to make canon line up or something?
Maybe. But I mean, like, it's not even, the thing at the end isn't even the formation of the Federation.
No, it's some other
just
thing.
Like the first step.
Yeah.
So you could have done whatever you wanted. Like, again, the last episode kind of brushes this territory. So I feel like they needed to take a bigger step forward or something, but they don't do anything different. It's just Archer coming out to give a fucking speech about God knows what. Apparently it was good enough. Hopefully it was better than the one in the last episode.
Yeah.
Because otherwise Troy memorized a stupid ass speech when she was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was fairly struck by, like, the amount of Riker compromises what can happen. So this is to get back to the framing thing. The amount of Riker and Troy in this episode compromises what can be accomplished by the Enterprise characters in it, because they have no time to really do anything whatsoever. And as you're saying, choosing this moment makes zero sense for Riker. I really don't understand what he gathers from this. It is neither an important, impressive, historic event, nor is it so small but so perfectly timed to his Pegasus experience that he can go, that's where it comes from. And the other thing about it is, because this is a prequel series, it ties into the problem I had in A Mirror Darkly, where evil Mirror Universe Archer was looking at good Archer's history, and he's like the most celebrated officer of all time. So the TNG characters who have never spoken about Enterprise have to be gushing in praise with it here, because there was no way for TNG to know that Enterprise would exist. Archer didn't exist as a character at that point. But it's another super hard sell, where I was thinking back over the 4 years of Enterprise going, I still don't think Jonathan Archer is a guy that anyone would remember about any of this stuff. This is just not, is not right. I don't think this is correct.
Yeah.
Riker's with Picard. Riker looks at Picard every day.
Right, yeah.
He's not going to go back to Archer and be like,
Well,
look at this guy.
To be fair, I mean, characters like Jonathan Archer, when you're 200 years in the future or however many years it is, those things get blown out of proportion all the time, right?
Sure,
it's like, the legend of the founding fathers of America is so much bigger than who they were as actual people.
Yeah. The legacy matters more than the person themselves.
However, if we had holodeck technology that recreated down to every minute of certain events of their lives, I don't know if people would view them the same way, because you are literally interacting with these people on a human level and seeing that they all are just dumbass humans like the rest of us who just end up making the right decision every now and then.
Yep.
And so, like, I don't know, maybe the Jonathan Archer holodeck program isn't one that people visit very often. I don't know. But yeah, it's based on the 4 years of Enterprise. Hey, I mean, those 10 years that we missed, maybe they did some really great stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, they don't talk about any of it. I wouldn't get distracted. I was trying to think back of, like, what's Archer's greatest accomplishment in the series that we've seen? I can't think of anything that I would go, that was a super important thing that he did. The Xindi arc, maybe? Like, he saved Earth from being destroyed?
Yeah, probably the defeating the Xindi, yeah.
But outside of that, there's no standalone episode where I can go like, oh, wow, I can see why that would be written down.
He did stop Earth from being destroyed by Terra Prime or whatever it's called.
That's true. He stopped Peter Weller.
That's big. That was a big deal. Let's not forget, that thing was locked. That was locked.
It was so locked. He said it twice. Oh my goodness. Yes, I won't bang on Archer too much here. I feel that it's a very strange choice for Riker. The problem with this episode, and it'll go into bigger things that we can branch off of this, is that it feels unbelievably constructed. Like everything is there's no flow to this. It's just a bunch of shit that gets thrown together, which I think leads into one of, like, a colossal problem that I don't really understand is the death of Tripp in this episode. So
it is so stupid.
The thing for Tripp's death for me is that it ties into what I was just talking about, where they get boarded by some schlubby alien of the week group, right?
Yeah.
Tripp immediately knows that he must kill himself to stop these aliens, even though this has happened 972 times in the past 4 seasons where aliens have come on the Enterprise. But Tripp knows immediately because he betrays Archer. He's like, tell Archer to stay here. And the Archer's like, no, don't listen to him. And then they punch Archer because Tripp knows Archer has to stay there to not get blown up. Archer has to remain right there. Tripp takes them to some fuse panel, plugs the things together, and kills himself for no reason other than the writers want this to happen. There's no explanation as to why he would do this at this point. And then, to further confound things, after he dies, no one seems to care. Everyone's just like, Tripp and T'Pol and Archer have a conversation. When Mayweather, Hoshi, and Reed are sitting in the back, they're not like, God damn, I wish Tripp was here to see this. That would be nice.
Yeah. When they're at the thing, they're complaining about their fucking seats. They're not even concerned. Like, it's not even, they don't even have a bit where it's like, I was really looking forward to this, but now it's really bittersweet. And what does this all even mean now that since we lost one of our brothers? No, they're like, man, Federation can spring for courtside. What the?
It's so strange. Tripp and T'Pol and Archer have a conversation where they talk about it, but Archer's not sad. T'Pol doesn't seem to care. Tripp is just dead. Tripp is dead for no good reason.
That scene is like, they're reacting in that scene as though what he did was the only decision to make. Like, it's like he did what he had to do. Tripp was an officer who always did the right thing, and he did the right thing in this situation. It's not like he Spocked himself in Wrath of Khan. He walked a bunch of guys into a closet and then blew it up.
You goddamn sons of bitches.
It's so.
But why was that
baffling
done
to me?
Why was he killed? I don't understand the point of his death.
I don't know. It's a completely fabricated emotional beat for the finale of the story.
They don't even care.
And the thing that's so fascinating about this, like you said, this is 10 years in the future. Literally nothing has changed with anybody.
Yeah.
When T'Pol goes to talk to Chef there, excuse me, he brings up her relationship with Tripp, and she's like, that ended 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Nothing has changed. It may as well have been yesterday.
Yeah. But
they still end up having that scene where, and they still, I think they got names on their shirts.
Yeah, they have
I don't know
name
if they
tags.
always had those. I never noticed that if they did. But they, so she's like, oh, that was over 6 years ago. And then they have that conversation with Tripp where she's like, do you think we'll ever hang out? And he's like, yeah, we'll definitely hang out. And it's just like, you've even at this moment where their relationship could have held some sort of emotional weight, especially in the face of Tripp's death, they brick it. Like they've bricked it the last half a season or whatever by being completely non-committal and just being like, well, we're not together, but who's to say what'll happen after the end of the show?
That shuttlecraft scene is bizarre to me because you know that Tripp is going to die before that because Troy foreshadows it, or not even foreshadows it, but she says that he's going to die.
Too.
So I don't expect this show to be The Wire, but you remember in the season 3 of The Wire, before the very end, Stringer and Avon have a conversation with each other on the balcony where they're sort of talking about their past, but they are using, not to spoil that, but they're using, they both know what's going to happen coming up in the very near future, but they are both talking about the past in this sort of like way that they don't want to expose their hands to what the other one is thinking. I don't expect Enterprise to do that, or Star Trek in general, but I feel that their last scene together on that shuttlecraft needed to have some kind of closing the circle with those two. Yeah. That wasn't Tripp just going like, we're going to hang out. Don't worry about it. Yeah, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to die. And then walks off and dies. There's no subtext to it that makes that interesting. It's what a stupid relationship overall. Like over 2 seasons of this show. What a waste.
Not to mention the fact that if you go back to the mechanics problems we were having with this, that entire conversation is predicated on something that Riker says to her. Yeah. So if you take that out of the equation, they probably didn't even have that conversation as it actually happened. And so that was just it.
Are you okay with that?
And I mean, I guess you could argue, I guess you could argue that like maybe there's some realism baked into that where it's like, yeah, they had a relationship. It didn't work out. It's been 6 years. Okay, fine. They're not together, but I don't know. I'm not saying that they need to be married or anything, but you're saying there needs to be some sort of closure to the thing that every time they've said it's over in the show, there's been like a wink or from somebody who it's either like Tripp being like, well, now I wore you down, baby, or like she grabs him and kisses it. There's always some sort of like one more step is coming, and then here they just don't resolve it at all. And I that's not to say that you always need the closure and catharsis with certain stories, because you don't. And I think that the desire that people have for that can get in the way of appreciating the way that certain stories are told when they don't get it. But this is not one of those stories. This is a story where it's like, you got to wrap this shit up. You got to do something. Mainly because literally nothing else happens character-wise in this episode. Yeah. There's nothing else that goes on. Nobody changes. Nothing happens. It's just like another day on the Enterprise, except Tripp gets fucking blown up.
Yeah. I would say that they needed some resolution, because it's not even that there's no resolution to it. It's just that the relationship gets chopped off. So the baby dies, and then you just don't know what's going on. So in realistic terms, I could see the death of the baby being something that caused them to never get together again. I could see that. Sure. I could see that being a decent reason for this to be the case.
Yeah.
However,
happens all the time.
Down the line, in this episode, in this shuttlecraft conversation, I feel you should probably talk about it, but the way that so many of the characters act in this is if nothing has changed since the start of the show. They're strangely like undeveloped, or like they haven't gone anywhere or done anything. They act all the same. They all do the same stuff. Archer in some way, or T'Pol, 6 years in, still has a bizarre distrust of Shran and the Andorians, where you wouldn't expect her to have this anymore. Do you think that would be the growth of that character? It's all just kind of silly and pointless.
You know, what I would have done, and obviously it's easy to say this in hindsight with the actual thing that they did do to base it off of. I think it would have been interesting if Riker goes into this program, right? And he pulls up the Enterprise founding of the Federation program, and you're watching this and it's just really off. There's something really off about it. Like, it's very clearly a constructed program by people who are looking back on history. And so it has that sense of grandeur to it, and like legacy and legend and stuff to it. Like, Archer's presented in this program like a grand hero and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how you get there. Maybe Geordi has a thing, or Barclay has a thing, or so, I don't know. But basically, he gets the real program, where he gets to see a point before that, where it's like he gets to see these people as they were, as real people. And so that lets him make his decision based on seeing the crew of the first Enterprise as the humans that they were, not the legends that they had become.
Sure.
And so that gives you at least something you can do with your characters to kind of like lean into the theme that started this show, which is the beginning of the Federation was messy. It's just a bunch of humans, well, you know, more or less, out in space trying to figure it out. Like, I think that element would be more valuable to Riker than whatever the fuck this was. Like, seeing, you know, because they're so far removed from that, for him to go back to the core of this show, and just for him to see that these characters were just people just trying to do the right thing, and sometimes they did the right thing, sometimes they did the wrong thing, and sometimes they did the right thing and it got them killed or whatever.
Yeah. I was framing it this way, like, outside the cleverness of the idea, I really feel that they lost something. Just like, I guess to go off your point, what I would change personally is that Riker's presence is extremely minimal in this. It's like maybe you don't even see him until the end or something, or like he's the cold open that sort of hints that there's something going on, and then at the end of
if they had just made him the chef,
right?
If he had just been chef, and it's like, oh my God, of course, guest star cameo.
Yeah.
Frakes is playing the chef. That's hilarious. And then at the end, he's in there by himself and he goes, computer and program. And then the thing comes down. That would have been fantastic. That would have been great.
I find his sheer amount of presence distracting, really, because it's not additive to the Enterprise story. It doesn't really tell me anything about the Pegasus story. And so much of it is like, when you consider the tone of his thing in Pegasus, which is that he's hiding a secret from Picard, he's hiding a secret from the crew. This guy, Pressman, is kind of playing him and making him feel guilty about the people that died, and like whether or not he made the right choice during this mutiny, whether or not he killed those people. And so this is a very heavy Riker episode, and they're trying to convince me that while this is happening, he goes, you know, I'd really like to go marvel at the old NX-01, as you know, and he hops into this thing, and him and Troy are walking around on the ship, going like, "Oh, look at these buttons! This is terrific."
Yeah, that's the thing, though, right? Like, there needs to be a reason that he chose this program,
right?
He's not just choosing this program because it's, you know, Unification Day or something, and he's just taking a stroll down memory lane. He needs to be picking a moment from the history of the Enterprise,
right,
where they made an impossible decision, and he has to use that to see what went into the people who made that decision, why they chose to do the hard thing. and that's where he gets his energy from. It's not because the Federation started,
right?
It's not because Phlox was nice, or or that it's not because Hoshi kind of thought Tripp was hot briefly. That's not, he's not like he needs to be going back to a certain point in Enterprise's history that is relevant to the problem that he's in, not just whatever the hell this is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean it's a solution that goes far back and like totally rewrites the series, but to match it thematically to the Pegasus, it has to be that something went wrong earlier, but people persevered and they eventually learned to do the right thing on it. And I think that in a series that had better handled sort of the establishment of the Federation, that more thematically matches, where you can see these early issues with the Andorians and the Vulcans and the Tellarites and stuff, right? But at this moment of the Federation, or whatever this sort of proto-Federation is supposed to be, all those problems were cleaned up and started again. And so it's this kind of like keep your chin up sort of thing and like move on and do the right thing in the future. I can see the inspiration for Archer being there, but as we always complain about the show, it's not big enough in its scope to really capture that energy, especially in this finale that just came out of nowhere and the show got canceled. And so you're stuck with just these incredibly small moments about scenes with Chef that are charming in how simple and like meaningless they are. Really, it's like that's kind of been Enterprise's thing, and Enterprise has done it well through the years, do these small moments. But when Riker shows up there, it's really a sense of like, this is all you got. This is T'Pol's story. This is Phlox's story. Whatever the hell Phlox is talking about. This is Mayweather. Whatever the hell Mayweather's talking about. Really strange. Just odd. Odd.
Yeah, it's just also just really unfortunate for the cast of the show too.
Yeah,
because it is just such a slap in the face to spend 4 years of your life. I mean, especially given that quote from Berman, where he's like, "Bakula was great. He never had a problem with anything." And then if he calls you and is like, "Ugh, I don't know about this," and he's never done that before, take the fucking hint, guy. I know I've been trying to get more boobs in it, but I can't figure out how to do it.
We'll figure it out for you. Figure it out for you, Scott.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just it's really unfortunate. I will say though, fantastic cold open. Like that, I feel like the cold open is where this episode was born from.
No,
because go
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, to have, you start an Enterprise episode, and then at the end of this bit, you hear Rikers from off screen and the holodeck brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Now, my first note was the cold open with Riker. I would have been pretty excited about this at the time if I was watching it live.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
The cold open is cool. I think back to my point, that should have been largely the extent of Riker there. Like it can be a sort of, I'm still even torn. I personally think that you lose a lot by this being a holodeck program. I think that I
think so.
Just in some subjective, like pseudo spiritual thing of like me trying to buy into this story, to see them not be the real characters at the end, it feels like they were kidnapped or something. It feels like I look back at Terra Prime going, I should have paid more attention to Terra Prime, because those were the real characters, and that's the last time I'm ever going to see them. Just really, really strange. And I don't know if there's any other way. There's no good way to get around that if this is your device, where this has to be the holodeck. But minimizing Riker would have helped, I guess. But at that point, that's your whole gimmick there. So,
right.
Going off that, let me ask you a question. One criticism of this, or Berman and Braga said that this is a Valentine to Star Trek fans. This is going to be the end of...
They always say that when they do something dumb.
This is going to be the end of 18 years of nonstop Star Trek production, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, why, in my opinion, this is not a celebration of Star Trek. This is a celebration of Next Gen, which is a different thing.
Correct.
Because their closeness to that project has tainted it. The worst moment being when Tripp and Archer cheers and say, "Here's to the next generation," and you go, what the fuck? Like, they actually had them say that on this show?
Yeah.
And then at the end, there is no mention of Deep Space Nine. There's no mention of Voyager.
No.
There's no mention of the animated series, if you want to go that far into it. It's only the Starship's Enterprise, which makes a bit of sense, but that's not the celebration of the franchise that, if I accepted what they were talking about, would work for me. It would feel much more holistic, as like, this is everything coming together in this episode. This is a pure Next Gen celebration, I think.
Oh, totally.
Which is too bad.
No, it's I mean, it's just it feels very cheap all around. Aside from the fact that, again, I'm astounded that they rebuilt, or just, I have to assume they rebuilt the sets
I think they
from
did.
TNG, because I was under the impression that they just shit canned those things as quickly as possible after the show was over.
People take bits of it and everything like that. So
yeah. But yeah, aside from that, it just feels really cheap. It's just the amount of effort they put. And again, I hate saying this because I know how difficult this stuff is, but I'm sure they didn't have that much money. You know, you got to get this done. It's, how do you round out an entire season and also a series, and also do a love letter, quote unquote, to the fans, which I hate it when people say that, because it usually means the thing you've made is bad.
You'd say the entire fourth season
just,
is that for this show too, you know? It's not overt references to stuff but it's a half Valentine, you know, where it was so heavy on continuity and fan service and stuff that it was built for fans.
Why didn't they go the other way and go like, okay, they should have gone Doctor Who route and had it been like, okay, the Enterprise is in this predicament, and then Archer gets hit by an anomaly and ends up in a universe inhabited. He wakes up in a room and it's him, Riker, Cisco, and Janeway, and the CGI ghost of young Captain Kirk.
It's like a Jedi Council of, of captains.
Yeah, it's like, and then so they're trading stories about tough shit they had to do, and that helps Archer figure out what's going to do. I mean, very expensive, obviously, but like, yeah, if you're going to do a love letter to the franchise, when they had that scene where they were like, "Here's to the next generation," in my head I was like, they should have just gone all the way with it and been like, "I really like this drink. Oh, it's from the original series edition of the Romulan ale that we have. Oh, it really has a deep space to it. Yes, I went on quite a voyage for this bottle."
It would have been more respectable, I think. So before we close,
at the end, I was just gonna say at the end, I thought they were gonna end the show on the Enterprise D. When they cut to the exterior and then Picard's voice comes in, I was like, "Oh my god, they are not gonna do." And then they went backwards. Sure, that was fine.
Kirk.
Did
the Kirk one feels really forced. In my, they hadn't done anything to get there. It's just they were going for the Enterprise ships, but Kirk was there strange. And then obviously the final shot of the NX-01 is very similar to the All Good Things final shot, where it's flying off into like a purple nebula, basically. Very similar to that one.
Did Bakula ever get to say the whole deal, the whole space, the final frontier deal?
I don't think so. No.
So even in his existence in the show, he still got shafted in that he only got to say the last line.
I think so. Yep.
Wow.
Let's before we close out, let's go to, we didn't talk about the very final scene of this episode, which is Archer, T'Pol, and Phlox waiting to go out for Archer's speech while the rest of the crew, who are still alive, sit in their chairs waiting for the speech to happen. To me, nothing really epitomized where I think that this series failed more than that scene between Archer and T'Pol at the end, because I felt literally nothing. And that scene is hand delivered to be a scene that sums up the relationship between T'Pol and Archer at that point, which has apparently been a big setup for the series.
Especially down to the point where he's like, aren't you going to come out? And she's like, nah, I'm just going to hang out backstage. I don't give a shit about any of this.
So really strange. I felt nothing there. They hug. It's supposed to be something. I'm still looking at this show and going, I don't really know who these characters are 4 years in. I don't really know why T'Pol and Archer would have any kind of feeling here. Clearly, Braga and Berman don't either, because that scene doesn't work for me, really. So,
yeah,
is that it's interesting to me when a scene that seems so obviously like it should be a success is so clearly not a success, and it really exposed the weaknesses, I think, of what I've been watching for these past 2 years of this show, getting to that point and not caring. Like the final shot of DS9 is Kira and Jake looking out the window, and then it pulls away from them, and you go like, oh, like Sisko's gone, Jake's alone, Kira's lost Odo, and stuff like that. And I don't know. I didn't feel anything here. And then just to cap it off, he's about to do his speech, and they're like, "End program. That's enough. We don't need to see this. We'll just get the hell out of here."
Well, I mean, that would have been like I said before, 2 episodes in a row that end with him giving a
speech.
Let's get the Federation together speech in front of a crowd of aliens. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's all compounded by the fact that they just don't react to Tripp being killed. Like someone at the beginning here, when you were reading the patron comments, mentioned Tasha Yar. Tasha Yar was in like half a season of that show and got like a 5 to 10 minute eulogy at the end of that episode.
Yeah, she got a funeral.
Yeah, she got a whole funeral, and she got a hollow cube that shows up from time to time, touching, even though, it was forced, forced touching. Where everyone is acting really sad, but you as a viewer are like, I don't even know anything about this fucking lady. In this show, he's essentially the second lead, and he's now been killed, and nobody in the actual show seems to care.
No, I would say best character in the show, and he died.
Oh, easily.
They killed him. Yeah,
yeah, he dies. He goes out like a punk. And nobody seems to. They don't even give him a death scene, really. They just he winks at Archer, and they shove him in that tube. And then they cut to them packing up his shit.
You gonna be all right, buddy? Get in that tube. Well, here's the problem. Terra Prime ended on a downer, right? And at the end of that, we were going, this ended with Tripp and T'Pol talking about their dead child and how it was a failed genetic birthday cake that didn't yield in the oven or whatever. You go, this is really sad. Like, why are they ending it this way? Why? All right, so say they even execute Tripp's death here, and everyone is morose at the end of this. Why? Why are they morose about this? I guess you could thematically say that the production team is upset that the show got canceled, but I don't know. It just doesn't make... You would think that this would be a celebratory thing in the way that Riker is kind of seeing it as a celebratory thing. And killing Tripp throws a real monkey wrench into that, where you can't even have the characters of your show enjoy the end of what this is because he's dead. And this show doesn't even respect that. They're just like, yeah, just ignore the fact that he's dead and let's go on about our business. Even in a better executed ending, I really don't understand what purpose Tripp's death serves. It's distracting from what they've accomplished here,
Yeah. Also, not for nothing, but if you have Troy halfway through the show literally say it's too bad he died, I mean, the language that she uses, I believe, is something like it's too bad. It's all the more sad that he wasn't there to see it, or something. Or
I think she says he doesn't even know he's going to die, or something like that. Yeah, it's some like hinting at how sad it is.
Yeah, but like my point is that there's like wiggle room in what she says, that it sounds like he's going to die, and so if you're planting that seed that, oh shit, Tripp is going to get killed, subvert that. Have him succeed. Have him survive, and have his survival be part of the thing that Riker takes away. I don't know, something like that, where it's like, he doesn't get back to see it because both of his legs are broken, and he's stuck on Mars or some shit. I don't know.
Right. Yeah,
but you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's such a downer. Like I think the idea is supposed to be something like, the idea of the angle of the show, the note that it's ending on, is supposed to be something like, it sucks that Tripp died, but he died so the Federation could live, or something like that, which is not great. Awesome.
But he didn't.
Again,
these aliens are jokers.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, like why is Archer not standing there before he goes out to give this Federation speech, going like, my friend is dead because I went on an unsanctioned mission to save some guy who I don't know. Like, there's no. That's the only reason he's dead, is because he went off on this fucking rescue mission for Shran, who, like, I guess he owed him one, but it's entirely his fault. Shran disappears after that point. Like, it's I don't know. It's just.
He's not at the founding.
It's a horrible decision made by Archer that gets Tripp killed, and nobody seems to reckon with anything that had just happened.
Thematically appropriate for Archer, right? That's been the story of Jonathan Archer this entire series. So with that, let's close this one out. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Patreon.com/ThePensky File is the best way to support the show. And these supporters at Patreon are the reason that Voyager is coming up. If not next, very, very soon. We'll see when Picard Season 2 happens, whether or not that intersects with this or not. But Voyager will be coming. We're done with Enterprise. If you want to support the show for us finishing Enterprise, patreon.com/ThePensky File. You get extra stuff. You get extra podcasts. You get the ability to vote on things. You get access to the special Discord channel. There's all these sort of like hidden poll type, behind the scenes, direct to show type stuff you can get there. But most importantly, there's 100 plus podcasts on there right now. So our captain tier also get a special thank you. Special thank you to a lot of these people who have been there from the very start. And we just finished Enterprise. Thank you, everybody. Samuel Custer, Tarek Latif, Andrew Cholog, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Christian Pouch, Matthew Ross, Brendan Howells, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Michael Pond, Grim Santos, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Vol 13 Hero, Darth Moss, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elledge, Stefan Minton, HH28, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jake123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Nick the Rat, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanchuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Grappler John Zorn, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardue, Retail, Tom Hickey, Disbrota, Ed Jose Hunters, EWNF Remixes, Ed Mark Starr, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Chris McLaughlin, and Rage for the Machine. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the show. It means a lot. Now we go to our final patron thoughts for real episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. If you're at the $5 and up level on Patreon, you can leave your comments on the episodes on Patreon, and we read them on the show. We read a couple. James Pulver says, These Are the Voyages was a cool TNG bonus ep, deleted scene DVD extra that had nothing much to do with Enterprise. They managed to make fans wonder if the entire series was a Newhart show that Riker enjoyed in his off time. Would forgive canon issues, I guess, at the cost of even further devaluing Enterprise. Norman Buckwald says...
what's wild to me? I was just going to say, it's wild to me that they did 2 episodes on Terra Prime, and they did 1 episode on this. Like the finale of their show where they're bringing in TNG shit and telling this giant story where Tripp dies. They did it in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But Terra Prime, got to make sure you get it. It's such a dense story that's so tightly plotted. I don't know, man.
It's sad. I mean... Well, we'll finish this and then we'll have final thoughts. Norman Buckwald says, first, Riker decides to let Picard know that Admiral Pressman is what he's doing, Admiral Pressman is doing, but waits until they're definitely trapped in the asteroid to let him know. I'm sure Troy even shook her head in disapproval of this action. I mean, this could have put the peace treaty of Alderaan in absolute jeopardy. Oh, wait, this is Enterprise, isn't it? So when did the scene cut out? When Riker appeared to ask Reed about his attraction to Tripp and then cut to Hoshi. Oh boy, let's make it look like we may finally have the definite first main gay character in Starfleet for just a second for the fans. I'm sure Berman won't protest. Oh wait, should I talk about what's in the episode? I mean, we don't get to hear Archer's speech at the end, right? That was a blessing to avoid possible bad writing coming out of his mouth. one horrible Owen egg omelet out of 5. Nick the Rat says, this series amounted to a decent TNG episode, 3 out of 5. At least it was overall better than the other treks. T'Pol and Tripp will always live rent-free in my mind's Star Trek playset. Can't wait to hear what Clay thinks about the Kazon. Oy vey. Love you, Penske File. Thank you very much. Love you too. Squirgism says, these are the Voyages. Riker goes undercover and pretends he is a chef. Each main character has a turn making pasta with him, and T'Pol gets freeze-framed for a little kiss. Is this the perfect series finale and my favorite episode of Enterprise? Yes, it is. 5 memorable bad guys out of 5.
I did find the kissing of T'Pol to be fairly creepy.
It is strange. Yeah. To freeze her is the creepiest bit of it, I think.
Yeah.
The kiss by itself would be pretty creepy, but to freeze her and just plant one on her. Kyle Barrett says,
no rules inside the holodeck, apparently.
No, there's not. Barclay would find that pretty tame. Kyle Barrett says, I hate this episode like the internet hates James Corden. The problematic double act isn't the return of Riker and Troy, but rather Berman and Braga, who hijacked the Enterprise finale and turned it into a personal finale for their journey writing Star Trek, an incredibly self-indulgent move they tried to disguise as a quote-unquote Valentine for the fans. Instead of the TNG connection bringing a sense of reverence to Enterprise and its fabled adventures, it does the exact opposite and has Archer literally toast the next generation. 10 years have passed, but the characters have barely changed other than T'Pol, who's a single bright point of the finale, her hug with Archer pulling on the heartstrings. But Tripp's death is laughably awful, and the show that is supposed to be about building blocks of the Federation actively ignores that plotline to go on a stupid Crystal MacGuffin exchange with an unrecognizably boring Shran. The final injustice is not seeing Archer's speech, instead following Riker and Troy out of the room, which clearly shows which series Berman and Braga wish they had been writing this entire time. Although knowing Archer, I'm sure his speech would have began with an absolute cream cracker of a joke like, I endorse podiums. Now that's a product I can stand behind. 1 out of 5.
He's right though. It does feel like it's Berman and Braga patting themselves on the back more than it does ending
anything else.
Enterprise. And
I'll have a quote from Braga at the end. That'll be illuminating, I think. Let me actually open up the Notion.
I will say the one line that I thought was nice, excuse me, was when I think Archer says to T'Pol, time heals all wounds, but absence makes the heart grow fonder. Maybe Riker says that. I can't remember who says it. Somebody says it. Sounds like a Riker thing. And says that, mentions the contradiction of emotions, and she's like, now you can see why we press them, push them away. I like that. I thought that was a nice line.
Yeah, I'd agree. I like that one too. It's good Vulcan-y insight. Vol 13 Hero says, the one time I'm sad that Jonathan Frakes was involved with something doesn't do this series justice, and killing Tripp in the most asinine way makes no sense at all. Meanwhile, Mayweather will continue his life's mission of being right near the action but not in the action because he's sick or hurt his ankle or is possessed by aliens. I will miss Hoshi and Phlox. 1 chef special out of 5. Ewan Tibbett says, these are the Voyages. I'm the Joker, baby, which continues Ewan's joke about this that I still do not get, but he's been doing this for a while. So I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate his patronage most of all. What? I'm the Joker, baby.
Are we getting Baba Booeyed right now?
We might be.
Is that still a reference that people understand?
Groppler John Zorn says, this isn't the worst episode, but as a series finale, it has a certain skip the extra take so we can strike the set quality. I like Riker's one-on-ones with the crew, but the rest is mostly garbage. Like most of Trek in general, the episode suffers from pulling punches. I would have had more respect for it if they'd really written an F you to Enterprise by implying that the whole series was a historical holodeck fiction, or kill Archer instead of Tripp, making his martyrdom a catalyst for the formation of the Federation. Overall, we've been spoiled by better thought out, financed, and written season finale since Nixon was in office, and if you kids doubt it, I have a delightful little cringe fest called Turnabout Intruder that you should probably get good and stoned on before you watch. Get good and stoned before you watch. 2 out of 5. Russell Elwood says,
does anybody need to die, though? I don't think
no one needs to die. I understand his point about Archer.
Yeah, sure. But even there, it's so manufactured to kill somebody off, you know?
I mean, it's mostly manufactured because the show to this point has not built up why Archer's death would mean anything for the Federation. You know,
Right.
Like anyone who dies here feels incredibly martyrist. You know, it's just like they're trying to make something of this person when it's really not there. Russell Elledge says, when it first aired, I didn't hate this, but somehow it felt empty. Like, really? This is it? One thing I've always thought would be a good idea is to throw out the holodeck part altogether, but still have Riker be the chef. We never saw the chef throughout the course of the entire series, although the characters spoke about him a lot. So wouldn't it have been cool to actually have been Riker the whole time? Like some sort of time travel accident. He was stranded in the past and decided to live out his years on Enterprise, observing Earth's first foray into deep space. That's my headcanon anyway. That's a real tragedy.
Sure.
That would be incredibly sad if that happened, if Riker was just stuck in the past.
What if it was Tom?
That's true. His sideburns fall into the stew that he's making or something like that. Rayo
he's
says...
still hiding. He's running from the Maquis and the Federation, but going back in time 200 years.
Rayo says, I missed this episode when it aired. The first time I saw this episode was on YouTube as some fan had stitched together the episode with the Pegasus. At the time, I didn't even conceptualize that this was the Enterprise finale because as a combined episode, it begins and ends in TNG and was by far the most interesting parts were the TNG section, given Picard nearly starts a war with the Romulans in it along with the Riker's internal dilemma due to the skill of events. In this combination episode format, the Enterprise cast ends up in minor characters in their own series finale. It was astonishingly bizarre, even more so than the TOS finale which had a woman running around in Kirk's body. It appears to me the writing was intensely spiteful to the Enterprise show and the cast in the way that they have Tucker die pointlessly to nobodies after rushing towards them with them unarmed, then say he never graduated college and that he somehow learned about antimatter reactors working on boat engines while also having the TNG characters mock the era. It feels like an intentional allegory for Berman and Braga sabotaging their workplace on the way out. The small poignant moments that Con and Trinier have about lamenting it all coming to an end gets completely undercut by the holodeck setting, as we aren't even watching the real Tripp due to the fact that he's the equivalent of a museum animatronic of George Washington. 0.5 out of 5. Point XG says Charles Tripp Tucker, second lead on Enterprise, best character on the show, engineer, the man responsible for making the Enterprise fly, who's been instrumental in saving the day hundreds of times, working his way out of tough jams, working Archer, the rest of the crew out of tough jams, dies by essentially pretending to be a dumbass hick and sticking a fork into an electrical socket. Yep. Has a great, I'll get you goddamn sons of bitches, final line or whatever the hell he says. It's really, and just the drama of he has to open up multiple panels, you know? He's like, I need to open that one too. The guy's like, what's behind that door? He's like, nothing, I just need to open it. He goes, okay, do it slowly. Really strange. Point Extra G says, I'm going to come out and say it. I've always liked this episode. I think it was a great way to tie Enterprise into the rest of Trek lore. I always felt that this episode wasn't just showing us Riker's simulation, but was showing us what actually happened through the magic of storytelling, and I personally feel that fans get way too hung up on this. The Enterprise D looks amazing in HD, and the recreated sets are also great. I also don't have an issue killing off a main character here, but Tripp's death was very mishandled. I think that's the biggest issue with the episode, along with the Strand plotline being very detached from the Alliance formation storyline. But I still think it's a great send-off. 4 out of 5 stars. Excuse me. Darth Mosk says, this is a great episode idea. The problem is it's a mediocre finale. But it's nowhere near as terrible as the fans claim. But maybe I'm just a TNG stan. This is just a long character arc for Riker, rolling out the pizza dough to when he finally bakes it in his backyard in Picard Season 1. 3 long roads out of 5. Thank you, Darth Mosk. A couple more. Yarpy says, this episode has only 2 nice things, the epaulets on the uniforms and the very last bit with all the Enterprise ships flying and captains saying these are the voyages. Otherwise, episode is utter trash and probably the worst series finale ever made. 0 pissed off cast members out of 5.
Not only is it the worst series finale, it's the worst sacrificial death in all of Star Trek.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
It's got to be. Might be worst death full stop in all of Star Trek.
I think it has that potential. I think it does.
It's neck and neck with Tasha for me about as far as killing off a character.
Well, I mean, Tasha's death was to get the actor out of their job. You know, it had a purpose.
Sure.
Like Tripp's job is over after this episode. You don't need to.
Well,
I'm
just talking purely execution.
Sure.
No other extenuating circumstances. Purely execution. I would say the way that they conceptualized, crafted, and executed. Well, I guess executed the character to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's got to be right near the bottom with Tasha.
Yeah. I mean, in that argument, I would buy Roddenberry's. I don't think it's a good idea, but I understand the logic behind. We want the Star Trek universe to feel like anyone can, like security guards can go at any time. Like that's real, you know,
Sure.
like cops will get killed in the line of action. So Tasha Yar dying. And it's like, I understand his point about realism, but he like as a writer, he tended to not really understand what makes for a good story in that case. And there's a difference there between the two things.
It's very difficult to go for realism when the person holding the gun is a muck monster looks like a black trash bag covered in KY jelly. So you kind of have to
it's all give and take.
Hedge your expectations of realism. Yeah.
Nick Sergey says, I remember my friend would watch whatever episode would just happen to be playing when he had the TV, and that's how he saw this episode, and he thought it was really neat and quaint, speaking as a casual fan of Star Trek. And I think it says something to the fact that Star Trek has always kind of found ways to celebrate itself in its own history. You can watch any episode, and it won't take long to figure out where and when you are, and that is the conceit upon which makes this episode work. That the episode doesn't fully work is also not odd. Rarely does an episode of Star Trek fully work, where the storytelling itself outweighs the flaws so much that the flaws are invisible. That we still love Star Trek, even with such apparent visible flaws in each episode, is a testament to what makes Star Trek special. Pretty good episode with an interesting gimmick. Two more. Brandon Howell says, these are the Voyages. I was surprised the episode was not a two-parter, and as John Lydon said at the end of the Sex Pistols US tour, ever get the feeling you've been cheated. If this was meant to be a love letter to the fans, Berman and Braga really fucked up badly. Tripp's death is added to make us feel something, I assume. And just like in Daniel's episodes, we, the audience, get teased about the founding of the Federation, but not shown again. And then the episode ends. Even Jeffrey Combs can't save this one. 2 Reed is shorter than I thought he'd be. Moments out of 5. Christian Pouch with the final comment says,
it's a real love letter to the fans. And who's my biggest fan? I am. And I love this episode. It was a great idea.
by me. Christian Pouch says, the greatest insult that has ever been foisted upon Enterprise, and this is a series that was created by fucking Rick Berman and includes the decontamination chamber. The finale should have been about the crew and the ship we've come to know, not jamming in some bizarro framing device from a better TNG episode. This makes both episodes worse for having existed, and both deserve better. Thank you very much, patrons, for your thoughts about, and these are the Voyages, or these are the Voyages, whatever it's called. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to leave your thoughts about upcoming Voyager episodes. That's the place to go. And now, Clay, our final thoughts about just the series finale here. On a scale of 1 to 5, and remember, you have to also revisit your rating for Terra Prime based on this, because I have an asterisk next to it on the spreadsheet. So why don't you do that one first, and that'll lead into your thoughts about this one.
Well, excuse me.
We never really got into why I led off with that thought about they're very different ones. You can try to do that if you want. I'll definitely try to focus on that here.
Well, yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think they are very different ones. In retrospect, having now seen this one, if I had to choose between the two of them, I was going to say, if I had to choose between the two of them as a series finale, I would probably choose Terra Prime, but that means ending the season with Tripp crying about his dead child.
I like this episode.
Which I can't do.
I like this episode better than Terra Prime.
Yeah, 100%. I like this better than Terra Prime. Terra Prime is just not doing it for me in any capacity, and is a terrible. Like,
I think Terra Prime is a terrible Enterprise. Terra Prime is a terrible Enterprise episode.
A series finale is only as good as its final scene, honestly, right? And you can't end the series with T'Pol and Tripp crying over a dead child and the end of their relationship. So that being said, this is a better series finale. I think it's an equally misguided episode. I'm going to say this is a better episode. This is definitely a better episode than Terra Prime, because I think the idea is absolutely something I would do, so I give it credit for that. B, I like the idea behind it, and I like the intent. I just think the execution, like the actual, like on paper, pitching this idea, I think is great.
Yeah.
But the execution of it just is not there. And like as fun as the TNG stuff is, and as cool as it would be to see that actually work, the actual Enterprise elements that they give you in this episode are terrible. They're really bad. And so I would say it is also a 1. As an Enterprise episode, it is a 1. So I would say ones all around for those 2 episodes.
We're like Oprah giving out the ones. You know what would have been neat? So the problem here is that the idea being okay, as you're saying, if this was not a series finale, this would have been an interesting concept to do as the final episode of the Xindi arc, I think, right? Where Archer's, Riker's watching how they actually stopped the Xindi. And you get the tie-in of the Riker thing, and it feels a little bit more thematic to the Pegasus there, where it's kind of like the mistakes made early in the Xindi stuff have now been reconciled, and Archer's learned the truth about what's going on. And it wouldn't feel like you were just being cheated out of your encore by not having the real show be the show that you're watching. If you're coming back for another season, I'm a little bit more forgiving of this idea that this is just a season finale that you're watching.
Well, it's tough there too, because it's still if you're doing the Xindi arc, it's still you're ending this season-long arc they've been building up to with a TNG episode, so it's still kind of cheap no matter how you do it.
With a fake version of whatever's happening. So I think it's always going to be bumping into that. It's one of these things that I think the idea is very good. I'm honestly not sure if this can be executed well in the way that Star Trek, these shows were set up and produced. Like it might be an idea that's kind of cool and it sounds good, but I don't know if you're ever going to get this satisfying feeling of you're actually watching an episode of the show that's happening and not just some kind of academic experiment that they're trying to do with the writing. That's my biggest thing to me is, while watching this, beyond the fact that none of this makes any goddamn sense, and this is like some of the lamest plots that they could possibly do for a finale, and the fact that Frakes is distracting as Riker, and it kind of ruins the Pegasus on some level. Ignoring all that, as the end to a series, I didn't feel anything about it. I was like, that's the final episode. It's over. I felt a little bit sad that I didn't say goodbye to the characters in the previous episode, that I didn't fully understand that this was over previously to this and that this was something else that was coming onto it. So that's my feeling about it, is that like, I think if you really liked this show, this is more offensive of a finale. If you're kind of indifferent to this show, you go, this is kind of a stupid idea, but this is not great. But I think that, like, I know listener Kyle likes Enterprise quite a bit. I think he says it's his second favorite. And he had probably the most strongly worded, this episode sucks for these variety of reasons. I think there's a relationship there where the more into Enterprise you are, the bigger a betrayal this feels like. And I never got into this series enough to feel that I could be emotionally betrayed by whatever they did at the ending here. I just acknowledge this is a pretty stupid, ultimately a stupid production decision to go along with this thing. And that's it. That's the end of the series.
Yeah, I feel like it's I don't have the emotional attachment to be like angry about it, but I do recognize what a misstep it is enough to feel bad for the show and to feel bad for the fans.
Yeah,
because like I said before, my memory of it was I actually liked it, but I liked it because it was a TNG episode and I didn't give a shit about Enterprise at that time.
Which is perfect for this.
And for me, I think
if you don't care about the Enterprise crew,
right. For me, I think I do really like the concept of it, and I just, that's the biggest downer for me, is that they couldn't find a way to give this a reason. Like the shoehorning of the Pegasus thing is, yeah, okay, fine, but they just don't live up to that idea. They don't tell you an Enterprise story that would be worth revisiting for Riker in this moment. And it's like, it's gut potential. You know what this should have been? I think this is difficult to do as an Enterprise episode, no matter where. I think you could get away with this if it was like a mid-season thing. It's like, it's sweeps week.
Yeah.
We got to think of something to do for the third week of February. What the hell are we going to do? What if we do this idea where it takes place in the holodeck and the TNG, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Sure, you could do it that way. But the other way I think it works, and they do this in comics all the time. They actually did this for Batman Beyond. Is Voyager on at this point?
No, it's over.
Voyager's over? Okay. So it would be very difficult to do this, unfortunately, given the landscape of Star Trek TV at the time, and because there is no more Star Trek for 6 years or something like that after this is over. But the way this works is you do this on another show that comes after it. So you do it, let's say, for instance, Voyager is still going, right?
Yep.
So Voyager's still going. Enterprise, if Enterprise, the last episode of Enterprise is Terra Prime. Things are kind of left unsaid. They didn't quite get to end it the way they wanted to. So in Voyager, what do? You take an episode to do a holodeck episode on Voyager where you can do a backdoor finale for Enterprise.
Yeah.
They did it in Batman Beyond, where Batman Beyond just kind of ended. So a couple years later on Justice League, they did an episode that was like a backdoor finale for Batman Beyond, where they showed what happened to everybody and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting way to do it. Like, honestly, if these new shows were longer, I would pitch that as an episode of Discovery, frankly.
Yeah.
If you have somebody go into their holodeck and check out what happened to the crew of the first Enterprise 20 years after they left, or some shit like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
yeah.
I think that would be a really interesting way to do it, but obviously that's completely different circumstances and not really applicable to this situation. So, great idea in concept, really difficult to do in general, really bad idea to do for a series finale.
Yeah. Yeah, and just my final thing is the difference between it and Terra Prime is that they're both ones to me. They're very different ones. Terra Prime is basically an Enterprise episode that's a complete failure in terms of what Enterprise was supposed to do. This is a failure in a different way. Like, this is a failure of execution in the finale sense, which is fairly important. Like, it's not just that they botched the landing of the finale, but they do it in a very similar way to Terra Prime, where every plot line is so stupid, and it's just like, what? Why are you doing this? This is not the right thing to do. So that's it. Where it's like a high concept thing versus an extremely low concept thing, but they're both ones in my opinion. This show went out with a thud, which is too bad.
Yeah.
So
I will. My last thing I'd like to say about this, since this is the end of Enterprise and the end of an era, and that era being most likely the Rick Berman voice.
Yeah.
I don't know how memory alpha works, but is it possible? Is he involved in Voyager?
He is, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Fantastic. Never mind. But what I was going to say was, I don't know how memory alpha works, but is it possible to work the lore we've created on this show about him into his biography on Memory Alpha?
I'll see if I can edit
or
his
Wikipedia
entry.
or something.
Yeah, I'll see if I can edit his thing if I need some kind of permission. He's I don't know if he writes scripts on Voyager, so it'll be more of a production type thing from Rick at that point, but we'll see. All right. Well, before we we'll do our final thing now. Thank you, everybody, for supporting. Patreon.com/ThePenskyFile if you want to support the show there. Much appreciated. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go?
Amanda and I are still trucking along with Rotten Horror Picture Show. On Patreon, we are doing Stephen King movies, Stephen King adaptations that are not on our usual list. So January, this might be February when this comes out.
This is February.
If it's
10th.
February, I don't know what we're doing. Yeah, no idea what we're doing, but I'm sure it's going to be good.
You can check it out. You got all the Friday the 13th content from 2021. You can go back and look at that. You guys covered every movie there. And do the Stephen Kings. Everything's continuing. Tons of content on Patreon. All that stuff is good. So we're both giving this ones. We're going to do a wrap-up for Enterprise, Clay. I don't know if you knew that, but we will do a series thing because I think we did a pretty good job of focusing just on this episode here.
Yeah, I can't wait to not remember most of the show.
That's fine.
So
I'll write it down and send it to you on Discord. We'll have thoughts about that. Enterprise is done. And now I'm going to go out with a quote from Brannon Braga in that oral history because I think this is kind of a perfect little encapsulation of him on this show anyway. Braga says, "It was truly a mix of feelings because on one hand I was greatly relieved. I was moving on to other things, and it was such a scalding experience toward the end with an estranged network and an apathetic fan base. At the same time, it was a show that we thought was finally getting really good, so it was upsetting that it was over. I really think we could have continued for 2 or 3 more years with Manny at the helm. We were already cutting corners. The show had shifted to high-definition video in the 4th season, and I thought it looked like shit. But even with cutting corners, the show could have continued creatively. Star Trek is a long-term investment, but at the end of the day, I think I was very ready to do other things. In fact, I had already had another project sitting in front of me that I had to tackle, which was another sci-fi show for CBS called Threshold. It was doomed to failure, but I'd been doing Star Trek for 15 years. I was ready to do something else, but looking back, it's bittersweet. More bitter than sweet, because it should not have been canceled." That's it for Brannon. Signing off. Thank you, everybody, for listening to These Are the Voyages. We'll see you next time.